picture this. You are sitting at your desk right now, and you're staring at your laptop. You probably have, 20, maybe 30 browser tabs open?
Oh, yeah, at least. Usually more like 50.
Right, exactly. And there's this stack of unread books sitting on your nightstand that, it just seems to like physically mock you every single time you try to go to sleep.
Yeah, that guilt is real.
It is.
Yeah.
And your social media feed is this just endless scrolling waterfall of articles and hot takes and videos, breaking news. You are literally surrounded by more information, more art and more human knowledge than any generation in the history of the world. And yet, instead of feeling like, oh, I'm so enlightened or inspired or deeply fulfilled by all this access, you just feel completely exhausted.
Oh, completely.
Like overwhelmed, right? You feel like you're just drowning in it.
Yeah, it's really the defining psychological condition of our time. We have access to literally everything, yet we just feel completely hollowed out by it.
Right. And since you are diving deep into sociology right now, you might be tempted to just, blame the algorithm. You might think, oh, this is purely a Silicon Valley problem.
Yeah.
Or like a byproduct of the 24-hour news cycle. But what if I told you that this exact feeling, this sensation of being completely crushed under the weight of too much content, it was actually diagnosed with terrifying precision over a century ago?
It's wild.
It is. Long before the internet, before television, before the First World War even.
Yeah, it really puts our current digital exhaustion into perspective, I think, because we are going to unpack a framework today that, it explains your daily internet fatigue better than almost any modern tech critique, and it comes to us straight out of 1911.
So we are diving into Georg Simmel's 1911 essay on the concept and the tragedy of culture. And our goal today is to kind of decode Simmel's incredibly dense philosophical framework.
It is very dense.
Very. We want to tear this apart to show you how a century-old critique perfectly maps onto the trap you find yourself in, literally every time you open your phone.
Yeah, and I think to really grasp what Simmel is getting at, we have to, ground him in his reality. So Georg Simmel was born in Berlin in 1858 to a Jewish merchant family. And if you're studying sociology, you already know he's in the pantheon.
Right.
He is a foundational figure. He's standing right alongside people like Max Weber and Emil Durkheim.
But his reality within that pantheon, it was incredibly fraught, wasn't it? He wasn't exactly embraced by the ivory tower.
Oh, far from it. No, he faced relentless marginalization and just outright anti-Semitism from the German academic establishment.
Wow.
Yeah, his public lectures were actually legendary. I mean, people packed the halls to hear him speak. He was huge with the public, but the university system kept him on the fringes for almost his entire career.
So he didn't get a normal professorship?
No, he didn't get a proper full professorship until he was essentially at the end of his life. But what's fascinating here is that exclusion actually fueled his genius.
Oh, how so?
Well, because he was locked out of the rigid, traditional academic silos, he didn't have to play by their rules. So he just roamed freely across sociology, philosophy, aesthetics, cultural critique.
He could just do whatever he wanted, basically.
Exactly.
And let's look at the backdrop he's writing against.
Yeah.
So Berlin, 1911. This is the absolute peak of European industrial civilization. Cities are just expanding at a violent pace.
Right.
Factories are churning out mass-produced goods. You've got electric lights turning night into day. Trains are compressing time and space. The whole world is getting faster and louder and infinitely more connected.
It is the absolute zenith of the 19th century ideal of progress. They are right on the eve of the Great War, though, obviously nobody knows that yet.
Right.
But on paper, it looks like a golden age of human triumph over nature.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is what I don't get. If you are living in Berlin in 1911, and living standards are supposedly rising, and technology is performing these daily miracles, why is Simmel sitting down to write about a tragedy? Why the extreme gloom in the middle of this massive boom?
That's the perfect question. And it's because beneath that glossy surface of, industrial boasting, there was this profound creeping dread among intellectuals. It was this fin de siècle anxiety.
Yeah.
Simmel saw that the massive upheavals of the 19th century, the raw capitalism, the rapid urbanization, it had completely dismantled all the old certainties.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the traditional structures of meaning were crumbling and they were being replaced by, just stuff. Endless material stuff.
For products and machines.
Exactly. Intellectuals felt that European civilization had become overripe. It was technically dazzling, but spiritually empty. And Simmel, he wanted to figure out the exact mechanical reason for that emptiness.
And to find that mechanical reason, he doesn't just start by critiquing factories or trains. She goes all the way down to the studs, right?
Right.
He starts with human nature itself, with what he calls the metaphysics of culture. He sets up this fundamental clash between the subject, meaning you, your inner consciousness, your soul, and the object, which is the external world.
Yes, exactly. If you think about the animal kingdom, right? Animals are just absorbed into the natural order. A bird doesn't question a tree, it just builds a nest in it.
Right. It doesn't try to improve the tree.
Exactly. But humans, we tear ourselves loose from nature. We place ourselves in active opposition to it. We don't just endure the rain, we build a roof.
Right.
We invent agriculture. We draft legal codes. We are locked in this never-ending contest between our subjective desires and the objective reality around us.
But it goes deeper than just, manipulating physical dirt and wood. Simmel argues that we reproduce this exact same battle inside our own minds. We, as subjects, have ideas and feelings and inspirations.
Yeah.
But to make them real, we have to push them out into the world. So we create art, religions, scientific theories, technology. And the second we do that, those internal feelings become objects. They exist outside of our heads.
Right. And this is a really crucial psychological mechanism to understand. Because why do we externalize our souls in the first place?
Right. Why bother?
Well, because raw subjectivity is just chaotic. It's a fleeting, restless stream of consciousness. Like, if you have a profound realization about love, it's just a feeling. It vanishes.
It's just in your head.
Exactly. To hold on to it or to share it or to build upon it, you have to freeze it into a form. You have to write a poem, you compose a song.
Right.
But once you forge that feeling into a song, it takes on this bizarre autonomy. It is no longer just your fluid feeling. It is a fixed, solid, permanent object out there in the world.
See, I get what you're saying, but isn't that just a really pessimistic way of looking at legacy? Like, if I write a book, I want it to outlive me. I want it to be permanent.
Oh, sure, you do want it to outlive you. But Simmel points out the friction that creates. Because your soul keeps changing, right? It's growing, it's vibrating. But your book is frozen in the exact moment you published it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the restless life of your inner subjectivity is suddenly confronting this crystallized, frozen version of its past self. You are constantly attracted to these creations because, well, they're yours.
Right.
But you are also estranged from them because they can't change with you.
Which brings us to how Simmel actually defines culture. Because if I walk up to someone on the street today and ask them, hey, what is culture? They're going to list things, right?
Oh, yeah. Museums, the opera.
TikTok trends, movies, whatever.
Yeah.
But Simmel strips all that material stuff away. He defines culture as the path of the soul to itself.
The path of the soul to itself is such a beautiful phrase.
It really is.
But it definitely demands some explanation. Simmel believes that your inner life, your subject, has a latent potential. Like, you are always theoretically more than what you currently are. You have this intrinsic drive toward a higher, more perfect manifestation of yourself.
But you can't just meditate your way to that perfection, right?
Yeah.
You can't reach your highest potential just by sitting alone in an empty room looking inward.
Exactly the opposite. And this is the great paradox here. Pure subjective inwardness is a dead end. To grow, your soul must go outside of itself. It has to engage with those objective forms we just talked about.
The books, the art, the laws.
Yes, all the science created by humanity. You have to consume the external products of other minds, pass them through your own consciousness, and use them to elevate your inner state.
So it's a synthesis.
Exactly.
Like, culture isn't the painting on the wall. Culture is the invisible spark that happens when you look at the painting. And the painting fundamentally changes how you understand your own grief, or your joy, or your existence. Both the subject and the object have to meet.
That synthesis is the only way genuine culture happens.
I was thinking about this agricultural metaphor Simmel uses to explain this, and I think it is so clarifying.
Oh, the fruit tree.
Yes. Think about a wild fruit tree.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a gardener and you tend to that tree, you prune the dead branches, you water it, you ensure it gets sunlight, it's going to yield much better, sweeter fruit than it ever would have in the wild alone.
Right.
And we would say, you have cultivated that tree. But why do we use that word? Because you merely helped the tree realize its own latent inner potential. The biological drive to make fruit was already indigenous to the tree.
It was already in there.
Right.
Now, compare that to a totally different intervention. Take that exact same wild tree, chop it down at the trunk, strip off all its branches, run it through a sawmill, and carve it into a mast for a ship.
Right. Nobody in their right mind would say you cultivated the tree into a mast.
No. Because a mast is an entirely alien purpose. It has absolutely nothing to do with the tree's indigenous internal drive. It is just a teleological system imposed onto the wood by an outside force.
So if we bring this back to your daily life, this is Simmel's ultimate litmus test for genuine culture. Genuine culture only happens when the information you consume or the art you look at develops your indigenous drive, when it helps you become the most fully realized version of your innate self.
Which means we have to draw this massive, unforgiving line between culture and mere civilization.
Oh.
Because if you are just acquiring technical skills to be a more efficient employee, or, I don't know, memorizing a list of polite manners so you can fit in at a country club, or cramming arbitrary facts to pass a standardized test,
Right.
that is not culture. You are not cultivating your soul. You are being carved into a mast.
Oh, man. Think about your own experience wrapping up a sociology degree right now. You sit in a massive lecture hall, you memorize 50 definitions for a multiple choice exam, you regurgitate them, and then you completely forget them the moment you walk out the door.
Yep, that happens every day.
You accumulated traits. You became more civilized according to the university's metrics. But your soul didn't move an inch.
It's a devastating critique of modern education, honestly. Real culture requires that the objective materials you interact with actually fuse with your subjective soul to push you toward your own unique perfection. And if they don't synthesize, it's just noise.
But this absolute necessity for synthesis, this demand that we must consume objects to grow, that is the exact trapdoor that drops us into the tragedy. Because what happens after we release our creations into the world?
They mutate.
Right.
They take on a life of their own. Simmel calls this the objectification of spirit. Once a cultural object exists, it exercises this uncanny, almost hostile feedback effect on the living soul.
How so?
Well, remember, the soul is vibrating, restless, fluid. The product is fixed, rigid, unyielding. So Simmel argues that the creative movement of the soul can actually die from its own product.
Wait, hold on. I need a concrete example of the soul dying from its own product. That sounds intense.
It is. Okay, think about a visionary tech founder who builds a platform to connect people because they genuinely believe in human community. It's their soul expressing itself, right?
Okay, sure.
But once the platform is built, it is an object. It gets monetized, it goes public, it has shareholders. Fast forward 5 years, and that same founder is trapped running a monolithic corporation whose rigid algorithmic demands are actively destroying human connection.
Oh, wow.
Their original subjective vitality was totally suffocated by the rigid object they themselves built.
They are trapped in the cage of their own past success. But, Simmel doesn't think objectification is purely evil, right?
Yeah.
We need things to be stable. If laws changed every single time a judge's mood changed, society would literally collapse.
Right. No, we absolutely need stability. And Simmel draws a really subtle, brilliant distinction here regarding value. Natural things, like a mountain range or a galaxy, they only possess subjective value.
Meaning what?
They only mean something because a human mind looks at them and feels awe. The mountain doesn't care. It has no meaning on its own, but the products of the human spirit have objective value.
Okay, give me an example.
If a poet pours their heartbreak into a sonnet, that piece of paper now has objective value. It permanently enriches the totality of human existence, even if the book is just sitting in a basement and literally no one is currently reading it. The human life has been absorbed into the object itself.
Which leads to one of the most counterintuitive, just mind-bending ideas in Simmel's entire framework. He actually separates substantive value from cultural value.
Yes. And we usually collapse those two things together, right? We assume that a universally recognized masterpiece must automatically be culturally valuable to everyone, but Simmel says absolutely not.
Let's pull that apart.
Right.
Why wouldn't a masterpiece be culturally valuable? That sounds backwards.
Because substantive value is purely about how perfect the object is internally, how flawless the brushstrokes are, how logically sound the philosophy is, how efficient the machine runs.
Okay.
But cultural value is entirely dependent on whether that specific object can be successfully assimilated into your specific soul's developmental path right now.
Okay, so take classical antiquity. You could have a piece of ancient Greek philosophy that represents absolute, self-contained substantive perfection. It is completely flawless.
Right.
But if you are a modern, stressed-out gig worker living in a chaotic, fast-paced industrial city, the serene, static perfection of that Greek text might be so alien to your lived reality that you literally cannot digest it.
Exactly.
It offers no handholds for your specific inner turmoil. So for you, Its cultural value is literally zero.
Exactly. It cannot help you cultivate your soul in your current context. While at the same time, a piece of art that is substantively flawed, maybe it's this messy, chaotic punk rock album with terrible audio production.
Right, like totally unpolished.
Yeah, that might have massive cultural value for you because it perfectly mirrors your internal state and acts as the exact bridge you need to process your anger and reach the next level of your personal development.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So substantive value is about the object's perfection, but cultural value is about the process of your personal growth. But wait, if cultural value is the entire point of human growth, aren't the people making the culture, the artists, the scientists, the engineers, aren't they trying to maximize cultural value? Like, aren't they trying to help people grow?
Shockingly, no. Simmel points out that the people who produce the objective contents of culture almost never care about culture as a tool for soul building.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. A theoretical physicist isn't doing math to cultivate the souls of their undergrads. They are obsessively chasing the objective truth of the universe.
Exactly. And the painter is fiercely trying to solve an aesthetic problem on the canvas. The engineer is trying to eliminate friction in an engine. They are entirely captured by the immanent laws of their specific field.
They just care about the thing itself.
Right. Simmel notes that creative geniuses actually show a remarkable indifference and sometimes a complete aversion to how their work affects the personal development of the public. They just want to dedicate themselves to the objective task. Whether their work later synthesizes with a consumer soul is a total afterthought.
There's a metaphor Simmel uses that I think perfectly illustrates how much independence the object has from the creator's intentions.
Yeah.
Think of a riddle or a puzzle.
Okay.
A poet writes a riddle, and they have one very specific answer in mind when they write the clues.
Right.
But then you read the riddle, and you solve it with a completely different answer, an answer the poet never even considered. But your answer fits the clues flawlessly. It makes perfect logical sense.
Yeah.
Simmel argues that your second meaning was objectively sitting inside the puzzle the entire time, completely independent of the creator's subjective intention.
Yes. Simmel uses the phrase, "the weaver doesn't know what he weaves." When we create things, we deposit relationships and values and potentials into them completely unconsciously. The object possesses an independent validity the absolute moment it leaves our hands.
And this brings us right to the edge of the cliff, really. We've established that you need objects to grow your soul, and we've established that those objects have their own independent, autonomous logic, completely separate from what you need and completely separate from what their creators intended. So let's actually define the tragedy.
We have to be philosophically precise with the word tragedy here, because in casual conversation, a tragedy is just a sad accident, like an earthquake is a tragedy.
Right, if my laptop crashes and I lose my term paper, I might call it a tragedy, but it's really just a massive annoyance. It is an external accident.
Right. For Simmel, classical philosophical tragedy has a very specific architecture. A tragedy is when the destructive forces directed against a being spring forth from the deepest levels of that very being's own positive structure.
Oh, wow. So it's not an attack from the outside.
No, it is when the exact thing that makes you grow is logically destined to destroy you. The system inevitably eats itself.
So if we apply that to culture, in order to become a fully realized human being, you must create and consume objective forms. You need art, science, technology, institutions. But those exact forms inevitably develop their own immanent logic, a set of rules and momentums and demands that are entirely disconnected from human needs.
Yes.
And that logic actively turns around and obstructs your spiritual growth.
The path we must take to perfect ourselves produces the very instruments of our imperfection. The development of the subjects and the development of the objects just cannot stay on the same path.
They drift apart.
Exactly. The objects go their own way, and when we try to follow them to cultivate ourselves, we end up lost in what Simmel calls a dead-end alley.
But how does this estrangement happen practically? Like, how do the objects get so far away from our human center?
Well, Simmel identifies the primary engine of this estrangement, and it's the division of labor.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because Adam Smith sold us on the division of labor centuries ago. It is the undisputed engine of the modern world. It's why we have cheap food, running water, smartphones. Why is Simmel treating it like this creeping villain?
Because Simmel isn't analyzing the economic output, he is analyzing the cultural fallout. So look at the scale of production. On one end of the spectrum, you have a city.
Okay.
A city like Berlin or New York wasn't planned by a single mind. It grew organically over centuries from the accidental overlapping needs of millions of individuals. So it has a kind of loose organic unity.
Right.
Then move to the middle of the spectrum, a newspaper. It has a central editor guiding it, but the actual content is a disjointed collection of articles written by strangers who don't interact.
And then you get to the extreme end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
the modern manufacturing plant.
A factory. Imagine 20 workers lined up to make a single product. None of them know each other, none of them understand the other's specific microtask, and absolutely none of them can look at the final product and claim it as an expression of their own soul.
The division of labor literally chops up the production process, which means it chops up the product. It separates the final object from the spiritual center of any complete human being.
And because it is produced by fragmented parts, the final object loses its inner animation. It basically has no soul. Think about a chair handcrafted by a master woodworker in their garage versus, a flat pack particle board desk churned out by a massive global retail chain.
Oh yeah, the artisanal chair has humanity in it. You can see the decisions the woodworker made, the care they took. The flat pack desk is just a dead object.
It's just pieces and an Allen wrench.
Right.
Now apply Simmel's rule of culture to that. If genuine culture requires you to synthesize your soul with the inner life of the object, how do you synthesize with a flat-pack desk?
You literally can't. The cultural bridge is broken. The object serves a purely extrinsic utilitarian purpose, but it cannot speak to your inner development.
Right, and Simmel completely aligns with John Ruskin here. He was the English critic who despised factory labor, not just because it exploited workers, which it did, but because it tore the cultural, spiritual content away from the human subject.
Right, and since you are deep into your sociology coursework right now, you're probably already drawing connections to other big thinkers from this era. Simmel is not operating in a vacuum here. Let's talk about Karl Marx. You already know Marx's concept of commodity fetishism.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that under capitalism, economic commodities take on a magical, autonomous power that ends up ruling over the workers who made them.
Marx was identifying the exact same dynamic. But what is so wild about Simmel is how he takes Marx's purely economic idea and inflates it to cover literally everything.
Everything.
Yeah, for Simmel, it's not just economic commodities that become alien fetishes. It is all cultural products, art, science, technology, language, religious dogma. They all develop this ominous independence. They all estrange themselves from their human origins and start dictating terms to us.
And you can instantly hear echoes of Max Weber, too. Weber's famous iron cage of rationalization, the fear that we would build these incredibly efficient bureaucratic systems that would eventually trap us and strip all the magic and meaning out of human life.
And you can even trace it to Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche was obsessed with vitalism, the raw, streaming, chaotic energy of life, and he was terrified that rigid societal forms like decadent moralities or dogmatic religions were suffocating that vital energy.
It's like Simmel is acting as the grand synthesizer of his era. He takes Marx's economic alienation, Weber's bureaucratic iron cage, and Nietzsche's vitalism, and he just weaves them all into this singular, massive metaphysical theory about the tragedy of culture.
He really does. Which brings us to the climax of his argument. And this is the part that hits so hard today. This is where Simmel moves from the qualitative problem, objects losing their soul, to the purely quantitative problem, the actual math of the tragedy.
This is where his 1911 essay feels like it was written this morning by someone analyzing internet addiction.
It really is eerie.
Let's look at the equation. On one side, you have objective culture. Because of the division of labor, because we have specialized fields, everybody is contributing to the pile of human knowledge and creation all the time. Scientists are publishing papers, artists are uploading music, coders are launching apps, lawyers are writing regulations.
And crucially, there is absolutely no limit to it. Objective culture can grow infinitely. You can always add one more book to a library. You can always add one more server to a data center. The form of objectivity has a boundless, limitless capacity for accumulation.
But on the other side of the equation, you have the subject. You have a human being. And your receptive capacity is strictly finite. You only have 24 hours in a day.
Right.
You only have so much cognitive bandwidth. Your soul has a hard limit on its capacity to assimilate new information before you just completely burn out.
So you have an infinite, exponentially growing supply, crashing against a biologically finite soul. And this infinitely growing supply of objectified spirit doesn't just sit there peacefully. It places demands on you. It creates desires. It throws the individual into a state of total inadequacy and helplessness.
Inadequacy and helplessness. I mean, think about your browser tabs right now. Think about your podcast queue. You look at the internet and your brain says, I should read that long-form article. I should learn how to use that new AI software. I should understand that geopolitical crisis. I should watch that critically acclaimed documentary.
Yep.
The algorithms are just feeding you this mass character of phenomena.
And notice the trap Simmel identifies here. These things aren't garbage.
Right.
If they were totally meaningless, it would be easy to ignore them. The tragedy is that they are potentially meaningful. They could theoretically belong to your cultural development. So because they hold the promise of cultural value, you feel a deep, nagging obligation to consume them.
But you physically and mentally cannot.
No. Simmel writes, in their mass, they depress him, since he is not capable of assimilating them all, nor can he simply reject them. You are just stuck in the middle, totally paralyzed by abundance.
To drive this home, Simmel drops this absolutely brilliant historical inversion. He looks back at the early Franciscan monks.
The Franciscans, yes, they took vows of absolute extreme poverty. They owned literally nothing. But because they were completely free from the burden of managing and assimilating material objects, their inner souls were completely liberated.
Wow.
They had all the bandwidth in the world to focus on internal, spiritual perfection. Simmel quotes a Latin phrase to describe their state. Nihil habentes omnia possidantes. Those who have nothing own everything.
But then Simmel looks at you, modern man, surrounded by 1,000 superfluous items, overwhelmed by limitless books and art and technology and data, and he flips the phrase. He says, modern man is culturas omnia habentes nihil possidantes. Cultures which have everything own nothing.
It is a devastating surgical diagnosis. You are richer in cultural objects than any human being who has ever lived, but you are impoverished by the abundance.
Yeah.
The more you accumulate, the less you actually possess. The more information you hoard, the less you actually understand or assimilate into your soul. All these things just become what Simmel calls ballast, dead weight that sinks the ship rather than wind that fills the sails.
But why can't we just stop? Why does this immanent logic actually force us to consume things we don't even want? Simmel talks about how technology creates artificial demands.
He points out that complex technological processes demand to be completed by links that have absolutely nothing to do with human needs.
Wait, say that again?
The industrial production of a product generates closely related byproducts, right? And the system demands you use them not because you have a psychic need for them, but just because the equipment has a compulsion to be fully utilized.
Okay, let's translate that into the modern tech ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because this is huge. Think about how algorithms work. Social media platforms were originally built for human purposes, to share photos of your kids, to connect with college friends.
Sure.
But the platform quickly developed an immanent logic of its own. The algorithm's logic isn't human connection. Its logic is to maximize engagement, to keep your eyes on the screen to serve ads.
Right. The algorithm does not care about the path of your soul to itself. It only obeys its own indigenous mathematical logic. And its logic realized that outrage and anxiety keep you scrolling longer than joy does, so it feeds you outrage.
Or think about the hardware trap. You buy a phone, it works perfectly. A year later, a new software update comes out that you need for a work app. But the new software requires a faster microchip, which means your perfectly good phone is obsolete, so you have to buy a new device. None of this transaction is making you a better, more cultivated human being. You are just servicing the immanent logic of the tech industry. The technological process demands that you buy a byproduct you didn't even want. You become, as Simmel says, just a carrier of the force by which this logic dominates.
And it's not just tech, it happens in the realm of ideas, too. I mean, Simmel calls out his own academic peers. He looks at fields like philology, but you can definitely see it in sociology today. The methodological techniques of research become so highly refined, so mathematically complex, that researchers end up doing micrology.
Micrology.
Yeah, pedantic, hyper-specialized research that just runs on purely for its own sake. They are publishing peer-reviewed papers that are methodologically flawless, but offer zero genuine intellectual nourishment to humanity.
So the technique completely emancipates itself from the cultural purpose.
Exactly. The system just hums along, serving itself, growing infinitely while the individual is crushed underneath it.
That is the tragedy. You build a machine to lift you up and the machine buries you.
That's it, exactly.
So let's pull all these threads together, because Simmel has dragged us through a very dark, Very dense metaphysical forest here. What is the grand takeaway?
Well, Simmel shows us that culture isn't a luxury. It is the necessary synthesis of your subjective life and objective forms. You must create and consume things to grow. But the things humanity creates take on a life of their own.
Right.
Driven by the division of labor and their own autonomous, immanent logic, they multiply infinitely, vastly outpacing your finite biological ability to absorb them.
So the very tools humanity built for its self-perfection inevitably become the instruments of its alienation and exhaustion.
Yes, it is a structural, inescapable tragedy built right into the very DNA of human progress.
Which sounds incredibly bleak, honestly. But so what of all this is actually intensely liberating, especially if you are feeling that digital burnout we talked about at the beginning?
Oh, absolutely.
Because understanding Simmel gives you a strange kind of superpower. When you feel exhausted by your social media feed or guilty about that towering stack of unread books or just totally overwhelmed by the hyper-specialized demands of your career, you have to realize it is not a personal failing.
You aren't lazy. You aren't defective.
Right. You are experiencing a century-old metaphysical reality. You are caught in the tragedy of culture. Recognizing that this problem is a structural law of modernity and not just an individual time management failure, it can lift a massive amount of personal guilt off your shoulders.
It really can. You cannot out-optimize a metaphysical tragedy with a better to-do list app.
No. And Simmel is pretty relentless about that. He doesn't offer a neat 5-step plan to fix society. His essay ends on a very stark note about paying the unavoidable price for self-perfection.
He really leaves you hanging.
He does. But looking closely at his framework, there's a massive blind spot in his reasoning. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought based on that limitation.
Yes, Simmel's worldview here is remarkably, almost stubbornly individualistic. Throughout this entire essay, he views culture entirely as a solo journey. It is the path of the soul to itself.
Right, singular.
He barely acknowledges the social dimensions of culture, how communities create meaning together, how collective identities are formed, or how a group might share the burden of assimilation.
So as you close your laptop today, here is something to mull over. If Simmel's tragedy is fundamentally caused by the individual being crushed under the infinite weight of objective forms, could the escape hatch be community?
What if true culture isn't just a lonely solo path of the individual soul, but a collective path of a community back to each other?
Think about it. If you stop trying to assimilate the entire universe of human knowledge on your own and instead share the burden, you read that dense sociology text, your friend analyzes that new tech algorithm, your other friend processes the geopolitical news, and you all come together to filter it, discuss it, and synthesize it for each other. Does the tragedy suddenly become manageable?
That's a really powerful question.
If the poison of modernity is hyper-individualism facing infinite data, maybe the antidote isn't better filters. Maybe the antidote is solidarity. It's something to think about the next time you are staring at those 30 open browser tabs, trying to carry the weight of the digital world all by yourself. Close a few tabs. Call a friend. Share the burden.
A profound way to counter the tragedy.
That's our deep dive on Georg Simmel's Tragedy of Culture. Thanks for joining us in the Muddy Waters. See you next time.